So all of you should have your bars ready to go. We're going to be going in this order. I'm going to go with the Jamaica, Sao Tome, and then the Ukiali. So it's exciting. All right, David's joining now. All right. So David, if you want to unmute yourself, you could.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome.
Nice background.
I had to pick one of the pictures I used for my trip when I visited you guys in was it November 2019? It's over a year ago. It's crazy how time flies.
I know.
All right, so we have a bunch of people on. We don't know if there's an exact amount more. So I think it's a couple minutes after 6. So we shall just begin, and everybody who joins could just join in. So my name is Glenn Petriello. I am the founder and owner of Chocotastery. We do lead chocolate education and tasting experiences now virtually, and so David and I have been, we've known each other for quite some time, almost at least like 5 years now about. And over the past year, we've, ever since the pandemic started, we wanted to provide a education and tasting experience around their chocolate, which is obviously really good and why most of you guys are here today. So I wanted to give David a chance to introduce himself for those who may not know who he is. So David, go right ahead.
Thanks, man. So yeah, my name is David Menkes. I'm the co-founder of LetterPress Chocolate. My wife, Corey, and I started the company out of our apartment back in 2014. We kind of knew about the end of our chocolate when we were starting out because we had started off with a blog called Little Brown Squares. So what happened was Corey and I were on vacation in St. Lucia back in like 2011. We happened upon a cacao farm, didn't know what it was. Someone explained it to us. We kind of got fascinated with it. So we came back to the US, started buying a whole bunch of bean-to-bar chocolate, and started going to some of the shows and stuff. And next thing you know, we're getting beans and little machines, and then our whole apartment's completely filled with equipment. And then fast forward a couple of years, our landlord was like, yeah, you totally can't do that here. And so we kind of got kicked out. So we found a shared kitchen down the street. We moved our operations in there. And then from there, the owner of the kitchen was like, hey, I'm kind of done with this place. Do you guys want to just buy it? So we said, sure. So we did, and we turned it into our own factory and retail shop back in 2018 and opened it to the public. So we've been in this building since 2016, and then we bought it in 2017 and then kind of remodeled it in 2018. And so we were basically open for a year before the pandemic. So it's like, okay, well, it's, as you can see from Glenn's background, that's basically what the retail shop did look like. It still kind of looks like that now. I'm in the office, so we're really cramped in here. So you might see like, boxes and all sorts of random stuff everywhere. So I apologize for that. We're, kind of known for making chocolate, not keeping a super tidy office. So apologies for that. But I am the head chocolate maker. Corey is the production manager. So I don't really know what we'll be making, for the week. She'll be the one kind of planning that all out. So she's really amazing when it comes to deciding, okay, this is what we're gonna be working on. This is what you need to do next, and kind of planning everything out so that we really try not to be out of stock on anything if we really can help it. But we do have more wholesale accounts lately, so it's been a challenge. But I definitely want everyone to know that, I'm simply half of the process, and Corey is absolutely, doing as much work, if not more, than I am, just in different ways. Because people always ask, how does a husband and wife work together all day long? We don't. She works usually in the front in the office. I typically work in the back in production. So we actually check in. We do have meetings, kind of going over stuff, and we try to not hang out too much during the day, just so we have plenty to talk about at the end of the day. We kind of keep work stuff here and then home stuff home, and keep it separate. So we've been doing that, gosh, almost 7 years now. So it's working. So yeah.
Wow, I feel like it was just yesterday where we were just celebrating your your sixth anniversary with the first time we did our first tasting back in April, and then we did one in May and then June, and so we took a little hiatus as things started to further open up around the world and definitely our country, and now we're back at it for the new year. So before we dive into the bars, I just wanted to make note of a couple of things. Um, so as all of you are already on mute, so we're going to stay keeping everybody on mute. So if you have any questions throughout the entire time, feel free to use the chat feature. David and I are going to get to every single question. When we get to the tasting, I would love if you want to chime in and share what you're tasting, smelling, what your experience is like. Feel free to engage with us. This is all for you guys. So we're here to make sure that you have the best experience and you enjoy the chocolates. And we have a great lineup today. Also, if you have received the email from David later last night, we had put a link in there for the Chocotastery website to get your chocolate tasting guide and your chocolate tasting sheet. So these are tools that we developed about, over 3 years now, where we are now, we have it all electronically, where you can go in and download a PDF version of it. And so we'll get into this in a moment. And then we have our guide where you'll be able to just jot down notes throughout the tasting. And then I think I covered all the ground rules. We'll be recording this. Obviously, you heard that notice when you came in. So we'll have this video for if anybody missed it, we'll be able to share it with you guys as well. So I think we'll just start. I'll go through our tasting guide. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go through this. And if you want, at the end, we'll be more than happy once the tasting is over to have you be able to unmute yourself and ask questions and have a discussion if you want. All right, so with each of the 3 bars that we're going to be tasting today, we want to look at 4 simple aspects. So if you see, the first one is looking at the color. What does that mean to us, right? So you can see most dark chocolate is in brown in color. And so we'll be seeing what varying shades of dark brown or light brown or anywhere in between, what does that actually mean? And it's an observation that is stemmed from the variety of the cacao, the genetics. Like, we're all different in our own way. We have our own different background. We all come from different locations around the world. And so the DNA of the cacao is the same way. And so we observed that to appreciate that we could have multiple 70% chocolates that look exactly different in shade. And then next we will go on to step 2, which is the snap. And this is a sign of our tempering process. So David uses a tempering machine, uses 2 tempering machines. One is smaller tabletop and one is a continuous tempering machine. And so basically we will get more into that process during the tasting, and you'll be free to ask questions about it then. But basically this snap is a sign of how well tempered the chocolate bar is. Are all the cocoa butter fat crystals aligned so that you can get a nice shine and you have a nice snap? And so there's a fun group of icons that you could choose, whether it's like dull or super, supersonic boom type of snap. And then after that, we'll smell the piece that we broke off. So we want to see what aromas are we getting, what tips and tricks can we use, and we'll go through those as we smell. And then we could finally taste a piece of chocolate. And what flavors are we tasting? And we have some tips there around tasting. And if you don't know exactly what you're tasting, but you may think you may know, here's a list of potential uh, flavors that you may taste. And so with that, we would then allow you to take notes on all of these aspects, where we have your maker, your origin, your color, the snap, aroma, what flavors you're tasting, what your experience is like. If you have any notes that you want to just jot down, any questions you want to just jot down, you could do so. So if you haven't had access to it, feel free to email me. I can make sure you get that. And that's just glenn@chocotastery.com. And we can make sure we get that to you afterwards. So any questions at this point? All right. So David, we are starting off with the LetterPress 85% Jamaica Bachelor's Hall. So everybody has their bars with them. So feel free to open it up, and I'll let David explain a little bit around Jamaica and its origin.
Yeah, so I mentioned before that Corey and I started off as bloggers. We were writing about chocolate, and one chocolate maker that we were following pretty closely was Rogue Chocolatier, at the time out of Minnesota, and he later would move on to Massachusetts. And so this guy, Colin Gasco, kind of a mad scientist kind of guy, for anyone who's ever heard of him or met him. Really unique personality. I love Colin. We kind of give each other grief on Twitter every once in a while. He is probably one of the most well-read chocolate makers I've ever run into, and really encouraged me to kind of do my homework. So back in, I think it was like 2012, 2013, we started trying chocolate from him, and hands down my favorite chocolate I'd ever had in my life at that time was his Bachelor Hall. I think it was an 80%. And I just could not stop talking about it. And I actually got a chance. I had lunch with him in 2015, and I told him, I said, I still think that's one of the greatest bars I've ever had in my life. I think it was like batch 5. I even kept some of it because it was just so fantastic. And so I kind of became obsessed with getting my hands on this cacao. The problem is that the farmer, Desmond, he only grows a little bit of cacao every year. It's a very small production, so there's really only 3 or 4 companies that have really been working with it a lot. Collins Company was one of them. Soma out of Toronto was another. Pump Street Bakery out of the UK, and a handful of others. But because I guess a couple of years ago, someone was kind of retooling their factory. They were moving and they weren't buying any beans, and so I found out about that. So the really cool thing is, for those of you who are familiar with WhatsApp, you can, pretty much call anyone in the world for free. So Desmond and I, got on the phone. We hadn't talked in a while, and I said, "Look, can you spare anything at all, please?" And he's like, "Yes, I can actually, spare a couple bags." I'm like, "Awesome, cool." So we air freighted those in, started working with it, and they were surprisingly quick to kind of yield the flavors that I was looking for, kind of those flavors that I had remembered from way back in 2012, 2013 from Colin. And the thing is that it's funny, as we kind of kept going on it, I got to the point where I felt, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with this. I actually went back and tasted Colin's chocolate, and it was much different from what I remembered. And it wasn't bad, but it was definitely not what I remembered. And so we're actually pretty happy with how uh, we kind of turned something that we admired into something that we're really happy with on our own. So a lot of people who were coming into the shop before the pandemic would always ask, well, what's your favorite bar? And I'd always say this one. This is the level of sweetness that I like now. 70% for most people is already pretty dark. When you make chocolate, you taste it every day. Your palate tends to kind of go towards even darker because Glenn would know this because he made chocolate for a while. Your palate just kind of gets used to tasting cacao without any sugar at all. So Corey and I are always tasting, the roasted beans, the roasted nibs, 100% liquor, and then once we add sugar. So we taste along the way, so our palates kind of change. So for me personally, this is my favorite. I wanted to kind of share this one with you guys so that you can kind of see where I'm coming from. This is pretty much the first bar that we ever made that came out the way that we intended it. A lot of times people say, well, do you ever get bored making the same batch over and over again? And the answer is we never make the same batch twice. Um, and when we get to Sao Tome, I'm actually going to quiz you guys on which batch number you have because there's actually a difference between batch one and batch two, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to it. But with this one, Glenn, for example, which batch do you have?
I have batch number 5.
Okay, cool. So that I believe is the latest. I think batch 4 we made in November, so December was 5. Yeah. So this is by about batch 3, I would say that was kind of where we kind of dialed it in. But I want everyone to understand that every batch we make, we use it as a learning opportunity, and we keep tweaking. So there's not always going to be like an exact same equivalence between each batch. We're always trying to tweak things. Now, the tweaks that we make as we go become smaller and smaller or different. So, for example, on Belize, we're on batch like 145 at this point because we've been making it for 7 years, and those dials are being kind of smaller and smaller at this point. They're not huge sweeping changes like we used to do. And we honestly we don't really do big sweeping changes from batch to batch now, but there will be differences. So when we get to Sesame, remind me, Glenda, to ask everyone what batch we're on. But everyone should be on batch 5, I would imagine. There really wouldn't be much of a difference that most people will be able to taste between 4 and 5, but that is the latest. So if anyone has a different batch, let me know, but I'm pretty sure we should all be around the same batch number.
Cool.
So I'll hand it back to you, Glenn.
Yeah. All right. So everybody should be having their chocolate out. Brand new bar. So we're gonna zoom in there so you can see quite the detail. I want to just admire this for a moment. And David, I know that this is now probably a year to 2 years old, this mold, right?
Yeah, I think we first introduced it with Tranquilidad. So that would have been, I think it was, a little over a year ago.
Yeah.
So now all the bars we make use this one.
All right. So we can see, I guess the first thing we want to do is just take a look at the color of it. And just want to make sure my screen is in focus there. So it's easier sometimes to see from the back end, but you could always see from the front end as well here. So around how dark is it, as in 85%. So that 85% is 15% sugar and then 85% of the cocoa and cocoa butter fat. Anybody want to share, what color shade? No, it's all good. It's all good. All right. So the next thing we want to do is just break the piece and hear the snap. We're ready. So how's your snaps?
Very snappy.
Very snappy. There you go. It's a new term. Awesome. All right. So once you have the piece, you want to go ahead and smell the aromas and leave if you want to share in the comments, what are you actually smelling? What notes are you picking up? And the tip here is if you don't smell anything immediately, you may want to warm up the chocolate, and it's easy to do that. You could just rub your finger around the side where we just broke the piece, and then bring it to your nose. All the cocoa butter fat will be melting at that point. So any further aromas will be released. Does anybody have any aromas that they're smelling at this point?
What are you getting, Glenn?
Maybe like a subtle sweet cream.
Hmm.
Like it's not like a overwhelming fruitiness, but there is some type of like I'm getting like a creaminess.
Hmm.
What are you getting?
It's kind of like a, not really coffee, but it's kind of like you were saying, like a creamy, like a coffee with like a lot of cream in it. So I don't get really any of that acrid kind of acidity that you would get from like a black coffee, but yeah, coffee with a lot of cream in it. I guess I'm kind of getting that. A little slight hint of floral too, but it's definitely not. Some of our bars, like I know, like Tanzania tends to be a little bit more vegetal, like really like floral, or Ecuador is kind of like that too. But this is less so. I'd say more like almost like a base cocoa with that
Yeah,
kind of cream. So yeah.
cool. All right. I think it's time for us to taste. So let's go in for it.
So it's funny when it comes to taste. I know some people like they put it on their palate, let it kind of melt for a minute or two. There's one person who will remain nameless who covers their ears, closes their eyes, and they said that you can't judge chocolate unless it's been in your mouth for 10 minutes. To me, that's a little much. So what we do here when we evaluate flavor is we take a couple bites and kind of just let it melt a little bit. So it's kind of a mixture of that, but we're definitely not like sitting around for like several minutes or anything like that. I prefer not to overthink it. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And it also try to aerate your mouth as well as you're going through this. So we'll just leave a moment of silence, and then you could start typing in any of the notes that you're tasting in the chat.
And Glenn, you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I kind of want to reiterate. The tasting notes that we put on the back of the packaging is simply just kind of what we get, but that's not the end all be all. Don't feel weird if like, oh, I'm not tasting that, or oh, I'm tasting something different. That's completely valid. Like Glenn was saying, everyone's palate's different, even depending on what your last meal was. That can kind of affect your taste buds. So feel free, if you're tasting anything, don't feel pressured to say, oh, I taste what's on the taste notes, or I don't taste that. It's totally fine. Every answer is basically valid when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yep, there's no right or wrong answers at all. So it's supposed to be, an objective, do you like it? Do you don't like it? Or what things do you like about it? Or what you don't like about it? Perfectly awesome. All right, so we do have an answer coming in. So Michael and Donna are saying earthy. And then another person, Larissa, says bitter and tannin with subtle fruitiness. Yeah, I totally get that. And along the lines of, yeah, the coffee aspect that David was mentioning, it's like coffee and there's like a cream to it that you wouldn't think is so like it it's like it's kind of like your mocha. Like like you mentioned it's mocha, but if you don't have a lot of mocha, sometimes you could still just get that. I drink coffee with cream or coffee with milk, but this is like a creaminess that's really nice for such a high percentage bar. All right. Anybody else have any other tasting notes that they've experienced? All right. Well, I think it's at that time we transition, excuse me, to the next bar. So if you want during, oh, we have another one. So Dorothy's saying it tastes sour. Interesting. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, and so between bars, what we normally suggest is, if you want to drink some water to just keep your mouth hydrated, that's great. No, as like a palate cleanser, we suggest some type of cracker. So I use these taste these uh, water crackers. If you want to go ahead and get some, totally fine. If you don't have them, it's all good. So we just break a little piece. It kind of helps with cleaning the fat from the cocoa butter fat from your palate. So you're not tasting what you tasted for the last bar in the new bar. And a lot of the times, some of the people who taste for chocolate awards, they tend to use soupy polenta. So obviously polenta could be purchased at the store, but it's not a regular household item like crackers maybe. So it's not that uh, you know it's not that frequent that you just have soupy polenta by your side when tasting chocolate. So if you have crackers, good. So yeah, well, you'd have a piece. And David, is that so? What are some of the things that you do to cleanse your palate, if the same or different, when both you and Corey
So,
are tasting?
so typically what we do is kind of like what you were saying, some water, some crackers. We have actually made polenta a couple times, just because when I was a judge in Peru a few years ago, Maricel had made some for us there, and I just really became um, and I just kind of fell in love with the idea of that as a palate cleanser, because it's like there's no salt, there's nothing else. It's literally just the corn. So that I think works the best. And so I mean, she's a chef, she would know. So I really do trust that. But in a pinch, yeah, we'll use crackers. But what we found for us is that Corey and I used to live in Northern California years and years ago, and so we used to live near wine country. So we used to go out all the time, not every weekend, but like 2 3 times a month to wineries and tasting rooms and things like that. In fact, our factory, our retail space is kind of based off of a wine tasting room. Um, and what people in the wine industry will tell you is that you can't really cleanse your palate with anything when it comes to wine. It's just, the only thing that cleanses your palate is more wine. So typically, a lot of places will just go from one wine to the next, and so we sometimes do that as well. When we are kind of, especially if we're going to be tasting a bunch of stuff, we tend to just kind of go one after the other. So we don't always use palate cleansers. We might just have a little water, but other than that, yeah, we just kind of power through and do that.
Yeah, I think that also is valid too. You know, not every time you go to enjoy chocolate should you have like crackers by your side. It's really not that frequent. This is only when you want to mindfully taste the chocolate, where you're you're looking to just take a moment, relax. Maybe it's kind of just like a thing that you want to just do after like a long day's hard work. You just want to relax. You just don't really want to stress yourself out or anything. You just want to enjoy it and just enjoy it as is. It's totally fine. So we're simply just sharing our suggestions. You don't have to. When there's no chocolate tasting police that are going to come after you as well. Um, but with the next bar, we have the Sao Tome. It's the 70%. It's a very cool design of packaging design. So both of these are pretty cool designs. So David, what's so special about Sao Tome that makes it a limited edition bar?
So as far as we know, we're actually the first chocolate makers in the United States to import Sadako cacao. So we started working with them. I want to say it was late 2017, early 2018, and we really fell in love with the idea that you have a very uh, a really cool organic certified project in this relatively poor country, but they're paying the farmers a premium wage. So we fell in love with the model, the economic model of it, as well as the flavor. The other thing too is that we've tasted Sao Tome chocolate from other chocolate makers from like France or Italy, and honestly, we weren't really happy with any of those. I have yet to taste a Sao Tome bar from another maker that I've liked. And I'm not saying that because, oh, we're so amazing. It's just, it's where you're sourcing from. And a lot of companies actually blend Sao Tome with a lot of other stuff. We chose not to do that. So I kind of got in touch with the guys over at Sadako several years ago. And maybe 2 years ago, I said, look, it'd be really cool if I could kind of evaluate a bunch of different lots ahead of time and kind of like see if there's a way that we can do our own kind of small separate batch, separate from what they normally export. And so they were totally cool with that. And so we just started DHLing a bunch of samples, and we finally found what we considered was the best, and ended up getting a very small amount. I think it was less than half a ton of beans. And they said what they normally do, like a lot of other farms, they'll blend a lot of different lots together. So they end up exporting one consistent container as opposed to, a lot of variability between cacao bags. So the cacao bag is around 150 pounds, more or less. Some are a little bit less. But the thing is that we've seen in some places like huge variability from bag to bag. You might open up one bag and you make chocolate just from that one bag, and it's going to be completely different from say another one. So before it got blended, we asked if we could go through all the lots, and we kind of told them what we were looking for. So they sent us what they thought was several of the best, and we made our selection from there. So this isn't a bean that you can get anywhere else because it's been blended with everything else and then exported from there. So I have heard of a couple of people in the US now making a Sao Tome bar now. So we're not the only ones anymore, which is great because I actually want more people to be working with it because it's a really unique origin. So this one is going to be 70%, so it is going to be a little bit sweeter. So expect that. But Glenn, I'm curious kind of to go through the tasting guide and see kind of what other differences we get.
Yeah, definitely. And so, so everybody look at the back of your bars and see, do you have your batch number 2 or do you have batch 1? So we have twos. We have,
Two.
oh, we have, Tiara has batch 1 and Michael
Okay.
and Donna have batch 1.
Okay.
All right, cool. All right.
So Glenn, do you have a batch 1 lying around still or no?
Yes, just give me one moment.
Okay. So like I was saying before, we do tweak roasts and other things between batches. The differences aren't huge, and I'm actually really curious because Glenn is in a unique position to be able to kind of side by side them. But for the rest of you, it's not going to change your experience whether you have batch 1 or 2. They're going to be extremely similar. But Glenn has been tasting chocolate for years and years, and so he might pick up on some things, and I'm kind of curious about that. But it doesn't matter for the purposes of this tasting which batch you have. But we're going to be kind of going off of the sample I have right here is batch 2 because I don't have batch 1 anymore. So yeah.
All right, so we'll break into batch 2, and obviously everybody who has batch 1, you could go through that as well. I'll taste batch 1 after batch 2 if you want to see if there's any differences. But let's see. All right, cool. There we go. All right, so in comparison to the 85, I just want to just take a moment here and just see the difference. Yeah, there, Shelly's saying that the color is redder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you could tell noticeably, I have an LED light shining on me, so you can kind of tell if if I put it like as I put it side to side in front of my computer screen, that the Sao Tome is much lighter than the Jamaica. All right, so let's go. Ready to snap? How's that snap for everybody? It's louder than the first one, or around the same? Decent snap.
Less snapping, interesting.
It's less loud. All right, cool. So let's take a moment and just, so Dorothy's saying no snap. Uh-oh.
It's not floppy, is it? It shouldn't be. Hopefully it's not melted.
They're both pointing at each other. Oh, geez, that's funny. All right, so let's take a moment and just smell what we have going on here. Sometimes short sniffs as well work. So you're not just, smelling the ones like, but just like small sniffs can actually help as well. So does anybody get anything interesting? So Larissa is saying nutty.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm getting like a along the lines of like a peanut buttery note. And obviously like a base cocoa note as well. Since this
I
is
get kind of a honey scent a little bit.
honey. Cool. All right. Well, let's get into it. Mm. All right. So as we finish up the piece, we have Joe coming in with saying it's smoother. And I'm getting that as comparisons. Yeah. Dorothy saying it's smooth, but with a kick at the end. What type of kick are you talking about? Is it like a spice kick or a different type of flavor or something else? What type of experience? A spice kick. Interesting. So Michael and Donna are saying peanut butter. Yeah. So I'm even getting like a fudginess, like a fudgy peanut butter, kind of like if you ever had like a ice cream sundae and you have like it's peanut butter ice cream, and then you have hot fudge, and it's all like rich and fudgy and peanut buttery. It's kind of like that.
It's a good description. I agree with you.
And the ice cream sundae I'm talking about, I'm referring to, if anybody has ever gone to a Friendly's, it was a chain restaurant that was popular back in the 90s. I don't know if it's around anymore, to be honest. And I'm not sure exactly where all of you are located around the country, but my family used to always go out on like the weekends for family dinner. And sometimes we would go to Friendly's, and the highlight would be these types of sundaes, which just like decadent chocolate and whatever other stuff as a kid. But yeah, this kind of brings me right back to uh, that time in my life. It's pretty cool. Any other tasting notes? So I'm just going to quickly take a piece of the. See, that was a louder snap. This is batch one that's been sitting in my wine fridge. Um, so is there any other comments you want to make around the Sao Tome?
I was just curious what you thought of batch one versus batch two.
Got it. So I'm still getting the peanut butter, but I feel like it's a little bit less fudgy.
Mm.
And yeah, at the end, there is something else going on.
Mm.
But there is like the nuttiness there that's synonymous with both. It's a West African cacao, so I think it's what a Melanado or Forastero variety.
I think this one actually it's Trinitario and Forastero. I think it's both, if I
Okay.
remember correctly. Yeah.
Okay. So just for all those who may not know, by means of educating you on the varieties, there's initially there were three main varieties that were synonymous with chocolate. You had your ancient variety, which was Criollo, has like more uh, like not I wouldn't say subtle, but like less intense flavor, but like more um, uh, I guess like it's well rounded, it's balanced, but it's like it's not in your face, not like as like super fruity or super nutty at the same time. Um, and then you had your Forester, which was the predominantly in West Africa, that was more chocolatey, cocoa, nuttier. And then you have the hybrid of the two of them, which was Trinitario, which you do get more pronounced, fruitier flavors, more brighter notes that are more pronounced. And then when you have, like we alluded to before, where you have like every cacao batch, every cacao bean in every batch, they have various DNA. I don't know about like the like going back to the same tree. I think it's a collection of multiple farms and trees in that area. However, we all have different DNA from person to person, and so each cacao has that, and so it provides different characteristics, which provides uniqueness amongst everything. So there will never be the same harvest, like David alluded to. There'll never be in bar to bar may be different because of the wide variety and the 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 DNA makeup of it, and so that provides a unique experience. And there's over 600 chemical compounds in cacao, so you never know what you're going to get. Is basically speaking to Tom Hanks. You never know what you're going to get.
Yeah, the other thing too is that chocolate is a fermented food. So the way that cacao is fermented, the ambient temperature, the time of year that it was harvested, the pulp that surrounds the beans can be sweeter or less sweet, and that actually won't affect flavors so much as acidity or astringency. So there are a lot of factors, and then obviously once we get the beans, the way that we roast them, or conching, things like that, that's aerating the chocolate. There's just a lot of factors that kind of come into play. So the thing that I kind of want everyone to be aware of is that, say with like really big industrial chocolate, like say Hershey's or Cadbury or any of those guys, they aim for homogeneity. They want consistency. They want the exact same flavor all year round, no matter what. And so what they do is they source from a bunch of different giant projects, and they change the blend. So for example, Hershey's sources a lot from Brazil, but they might be using, say, 35% Brazil and like 55% West Africa, and then a little bit from India or whatever. And they might change those percentages throughout the year depending on the beans. They actually have a whole bunch of food scientists tasting all of the different lots of beans that come in, and they actually roast them differently and change the blending. And it's actually kind of impressive. It's uniquely, or it's uniformly awful, but it's uniform. So they got that going for them. We kind of look at differences from harvest to harvest, and we want to bring out those differences, because if there's something really interesting going on, we want you to taste that. So we're, rather than trying to obfuscate or hide or blend things away, we want to share that with you. And like, hey, this is really cool. We really like this. We won't bring in beans if we're not happy with them. So that actually has happened where we'll get a sample and we'll say, look, we're really sorry, this isn't working for us. But generally speaking, we get a sample, we like it, and if it is different, then we'll work with it and see what we can do with it. So some are more consistent than others. So for example, those of you who have tried our Ecuador bar, Costa Esmeraldas is probably the most consistent beans that I've ever worked with. We've been working with them for 4 years now, and I've really not seen too many differences at all. They're very good about keeping that consistency on their end, but it's consistently good as opposed to consistently bad, which is really great. So yeah.
Yep. All right, so I think we're ready for the last one, and that is the Pru Ukiali. And this is the private reserve, and I know there's a great story behind it. So as far as marveling in the nice packaging as well, David, please share us the story.
So we've been working with this guy, Dan O'Doherty, for several years. He's one of the top cacao fermentation experts in the world. And we met in Hawaii back in 2014. And he really liked our chocolate, and he liked our approach to chocolate and how we roast and how we conch and all that. And so he started sending us samples. He'd go around the world and he would be working with different farm projects. And he would send us a sample, say, hey, what do you think of this? And generally speaking, he would send us stuff that was pretty good. Nothing was really blowing us away. He was working in Indonesia for a while, and we got a whole bunch of samples from Indonesia, and we really weren't happy with anything coming out of there. But then one day we got a package from him, and it was from Peru. And we tasted it, and we roasted it up, and I brought some to Corey, and I said, try this. What do you think? And Corey looked at me and said, buy as much of this as you possibly can. So I asked Dan, I'm like, well, how much did you ferment? And he's like, 200 kilos. I said, I'll buy all of it. So we bought all of it. And so what happened was, that was a project that hadn't even gotten started yet. So Ukiali River Cacao was a project that was started in 2016. Dan kind of built it up as a super high quality, cacao fermentary. And then Robin Jordan and Isaac and these other guys basically got together and said, okay, we're going to buy the best of the best cacao from the farmers in our region, and kind of like, blend like everyone else is doing, they kind of blend them all together and export them that way. So when we started getting samples of what they were doing, it was still very good, but it wasn't anywhere near that same quality that we first tasted. So I flew down there in 2017, and I went through all the lots, and I was actually there for that ferment. And I kind of said, okay, well, I can't buy a whole container's worth of beans, but I can, take a part of it for ourselves. And so what we did was I supervised one of the ferments. It was the most involved that I've ever been in the fermentation process of cacao. So where we were sourcing it from, how we fermented it, and then how we dried it. was super important. And so once we had that all working to where I was happy with it, I came back to the States. They finished, bagging everything up, and then they exported it out with their container. So we call it our private reserve because that is cacao that only we have. There is no other chocolate maker that has this. So you might see, you can even Google it. There's several chocolate makers now making an ukiyo-e bar, so they're definitely out there. And I encourage you, please go out and try as many as you like because they're all different. But there's something I feel very unique about what we have, and I actually need to go back down there because we're starting to run low. And with the pandemic, I was actually supposed to go down, let's see, in February, and then like the pandemic hit, and so now we're kind of like trying to figure out how to do. So I'm kind of doing some work remotely with them now. But this is something that's very special to me. This is our most it's our best selling bar. So we make more of this bar than anything else. This is our number one seller. So for a long time, this was my favorite bar that we made until like I said, the Jamaica 85 kind of beat it out for me personally. But again, that's just my own personal taste. Also, I'd like to point out as far as the packaging goes, that is actually kind of the inverse of what you think. So it's actually a gold paper with black ink on it, and it's a special type of black ink that doesn't show fingerprints because we didn't want people's fingerprints showing up all over the bar. So